on Roe v. Wade, most Americans disapprove of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn it. This is a CBS News YouGov poll, which found 59% of Americans don't like the fact that it was overturned. But get this, 41% of Americans approve of what the court has done. National co-chair of the Women's March on Washington is with us this morning. Please welcome to the show Carmen Perez. Also this morning, I'm joined by a prominent women's rights attorney, Julie F.K., for more on this and the ramifications of the court's decision. Welcome to the program and thank you very much for being with me this morning. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're both very busy. Carmen, I want to start with you. How do you feel?
I mean, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I feel deep betrayal by the jurists who swore before U.S. Congress that they believed that Roe was a settled law. I feel despair, but I am extremely driven to continue to fight for women and LGBTQIA communities, and especially poor women who don't have access. But really, this is the first time in U.S. history that the Supreme Court has reversed past precedent and to strip these rights away from people. And let's just be clear, there was no democratic process, no reproductive health experts were consulted, just critical life-altering decisions being made about our bodies. And so, you know, I am angered, like many people here in the United States, but I am, you know, going to continue to show up. There's been protests all over this country. I was at one yesterday, the day before. You know, people are going to show up tomorrow, and they're going to continue to fight for us to have reproductive rights, abortion rights, and for people to be safe.
Julie, you're a women's rights attorney. You have looked at this issue across the world. People are looking at America and saying, how could this happen? Tell us about the issue of codifying. A lot of people are saying President Obama should have codified this decision. What does that mean, and how would it have changed what the court was able to do?
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm glad to be here as well, and I appreciate that the whole world is watching. I think for a long time, America was really seen as a leader on this issue, and we have certainly fallen behind global norms and global human rights norms. You know, we've had 50 years of politicking and taking aim at Roe in this country. And when we lost the 2016 election to Donald Trump, we lost the Supreme Court. So this is really a result of that kind of politicization of our court. If President Obama or President Clinton or anybody had taken the time to codify Roe, we wouldn't be in this position. And certainly if we had enough of pro-abortion rights majority in Washington right now, we could pass the Women's Health Protection Act and create a federal protection, but that's not the same as a constitutional protection. And I think it's really important to focus on the fact that this ultra-conservative majority said that these rights were not contained in the Constitution. They really threw out a lot of established precedent in one fell swoop. And, you know, these are not just constitutional rights, they're human rights that are at issue.
Carmen, can you tell me what this means for women in states like Texas or Mississippi? In Mississippi, where there's only one, apparently, abortion clinic anyway. What does it mean for them? Does that mean that they face criminal prosecution once these trigger laws come into effect?
Of course, you know, these women, you know, will have to travel across state. You know, these people will have to experience the brunt of criminalization at its worst, including long-term incarceration, including the possibility of serving a life sentence and heavy fines. Like you said, particularly in southern states where crossing the border, they're going to have to be crossing the border to a neighboring state. It actually doesn't change anything, right? Abortion bans went into effect immediately in Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Missouri, Oklahoma, South Dakota, and Utah after the ruling. And these are the same states that already have the highest maternal mortality rates in the nation. Idaho, Tennessee, Texas, Mississippi, North Dakota, and Wyoming also have laws that will soon ban abortion. People who get pregnant in these states will have nowhere to go. If they can't afford the high cost of an expensive flight and a hotel stay in a faraway state, as well as time off of work and childcare if needed. Also, women in Louisiana, for example, will have to travel over 700 miles to reach a state where abortion is legal. So forced birth will push women further into poverty, despair, and even death. This is extremely critical. And I also want to say, I think oftentimes, men are always asking, what can we do? This also affects men. Since conception happens because of their actions as well, we've seen a lot of men show up for this movement. And so, we need to make sure that we continue to show up. Let's be clear, this ruling has also nothing to do with protecting children. America is not a pro-life country. We know this because the same Supreme Court justices who have taken women's right to abortion away have also voted to expand the presence of guns in public.
The irony of that not lost on those observing your country from around the world. I want to talk about the Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic Speaker of the House, because she made a comment yesterday which I wanted to play and get your reaction to. Of course, not every state is going to stop women from being able to access healthcare in this way. Obviously, that is going to be up to individual states. This is what Nancy Pelosi had to say. Take a listen.
Be aware of this. The Republicans are plotting a nationwide abortion ban. They cannot be allowed to have a majority in the Congress to do that. But that's their goal. So,
Julie, if the Republicans get control of the Congress, then they can institute a nationwide ban. Would that mean that people in states like California wouldn't be able to access abortions?
Correct. They would not be able to access legal abortions. As we know, when abortion is criminalized, it doesn't go away, it goes underground. But yes, it is possible that anti-abortion forces, were they able to have at least enough of a majority in the House and Senate to override a presidential veto, or if they controlled the branches of government, that they could pass the so-called Human Life Amendment, which would criminalize abortion on a national level. That's very similar to what I saw in Ireland when they had a constitutional provision that equated the life of the so-called unborn with the life of the so-called mother. And the consequences are really horrific for people, for women who are seeking abortion services as well. I think it's really important to note that these bans on abortion also affect maternal health care. The maternal mortality rate, as we mentioned earlier, is really horrible in our country and disproportionately affects women of color. But we've seen too many tragic cases worldwide of women who are experiencing miscarriages where they're not treated and eventually have developed sepsis and died. So there's really a lot of threats that are going on to the access to good maternal health care, to contraceptives. And in this country, we don't have a public health care system. We have some Medicaid available for people who are in poverty and Medicare for people who are older, but we don't have the kind of access to health care that other countries in the world do that have a national health care system. And so, as we've seen during COVID, as well as we see on a daily basis for access to reproductive health care, people in poverty, people in rural areas, teens, and disproportionately women of color lack access to healthcare services. So in my view, we have a lot of work to do as a country to get, the preservation of life, safe motherhood, all those pieces in place, rather than just always aiming at taking away abortion rights. And I think there's a real level of hypocrisy and politicization of healthcare in this country that's not serving anyone well.
Yeah, and so unique to your country in many ways as well. It's been fascinating talking to both of you. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Women's March National Co-Chair and CEO of the Gathering for Justice, Carmen Perez, and prominent women's rights attorney, activist and author Julie F.K. Thank you both so much this morning.